A few weeks ago, my child asked me, how many genders are there? I thought for a moment and replied, it depends. And in this video, you can see why it depends on how you look at it and why one number alone is always wrong. Let's move on to the first point, which is absolutely undisputed and at the same time causes problems for many people. Of course, there are 3 genders, as everyone knows: male, female and neuter. Der Mann, die Frau, das Auto. Well, these are linguistic genders and they are not always so logical. Das Schiff is logical, it's a thing, but der Kutter is also a thing and masculine, and die Brücke on the ship is also just a thing and feminine. It's easier in English where it is it. It is also not the same in all languages. In Spanish, el sol is masculine. In German, die Sonne is feminine. In contrast, la luna is feminine in Spanish and der Mond is masculine in German. So there is no doubt that linguistically there are 3 genders in German. Personally, I thought that was sufficient and actually well prepared for the current situation. For men, we would have the masculine gender, for women, the feminine gender, and for people who define themselves as neither male nor female, the 3rd gender would already exist. But I was probably the only one who thought that. Let's move on to the second point, which is also largely undisputed. If animals or humans want to reproduce, you need a male and a female. Well, almost, because aphids or turtles can reproduce without males, and the species Aspidoceles neomexicanus, the New Mexican whiptail, is a lizard species without males. This is known as parthenogenesis or virgin generation, Jungfernzeugung. Perhaps there is something to Mary's virginity after all. And even in humans or mammals, strictly speaking, you only need the female egg and the male sperm, and then the female has to carry it to term. Some couples only have offspring through artificial insemination, and in the breeding of cattle, pigs or horses, boar and sow, or stallion and mare rarely come together physically. And in the animal kingdom, there are also species in which the sex changes with age. So yes, you usually need male and female genetic material to produce offspring. And if humans are not cloned, this is still the case with us. So we have 3 linguistic genders and usually 2 biological genders. Let's move on to the 3rd point, the law. At the end of 2018, the law in Germany was changed so that a 3rd gender could be entered in the passport, divers. A newborn now has 4 options. In addition to the familiar female and male, you can leave the gender open for the time being or also enter diverse. This is a big bonus. In the last century, many children born with both sex characteristics were surgically reassigned. It is important to understand that depending on the phase of pregnancy, a very special hormonal balance results in the birth of a perfect boy or a perfect girl. If the hormones deviate during the pregnancy, this can have consequences. This is not a new phenomenon. There is a statue of the sleeping hermaphrodite, which is based on a Greek sculpture from the 2nd century BC. Or in ancient Rome, there is a Greek scribe, Diodorus Siculus, who wrote about numerous sexual transformations. Even then, the status of the person varied from highly respected to shunned, sometimes even killed as a bad omen. Children were not killed in post-war Germany, but were regularly surgically adapted. In 2021, cisgender reassignment of children was also banned. Immediately after birth, it is impossible to decide how the child will develop. The option of leaving the gender open is therefore a very good way of doing justice to the child and its development. This year, the psychological assessment that has been necessary since 1981 also became obsolete, and you can now have your gender changed at the Standesamt at your own request. All you have to do is apply 3 months in advance and choose a first name that matches your gender. From the age of 14, young people can also do this with their parents' consent. So we have 3 linguistic and usually 2 biological genders and 4 legal options: male, female, diverse, or leave it open. Let's move on to the 4th point, tradition. Depending on where you are in the world, on the Indian subcontinent there are the Hijra, who are already mentioned in the Kama Sutra, or in Mexico with the Zapotecs there are the Mushe, who are born as a boy but later live as a woman, or the Marimacha, who are born as a girl and later live as a man. These are recognized in society. In Germany, transvestites have been recognized since 1910s. Magnus Hirschfeld issues transvestite license in Berlin, which allowed men to dress as women. Previously, this could have been a criminal offense. Until the French Revolution, homosexuality was often punishable by death in Europe. When this was abolished in France, the death penalty was also replaced by imprisonment in Prussia. Of course, this applied to men. Several attempts were made to abolish the criminalization of homosexuality because even doctors could not provide any justification for criminalization. But it was not until 1994 that it was finally abolished. So traditionally, there is no third sex in Germany. But why not? When they were already known in Greece and Rome in ancient times. It could be due to Christianity and the role of men and women, because if men and women had their roles and everything was okay with it, something else was not okay. The Constitutio Criminalis Carolina thus prohibited all same-sex fornication. In 1601, the case of the French chambermaid Marie Le Mercier, who was accused of same-sex acts, came before the court. However, a medical report certified that she was a hermaphrodite and was therefore not punished. Even in German legal codes, such as in Prussia, there were even hermaphrodite paragraphs that stipulated that in the case of a born hermaphrodite, the parents initially determined the gender and raised the children, but that they could decide on their own gender at the age of 18. Actually quite progressive. But around 1900, these paragraphs disappeared from the law books throughout Germany. For a short period of time, people in Germany were aware of hermaphrodites, but from 1900 onwards it seemed to be forgotten again. We can therefore conclude that there are traditionally 2 to 3 genders, depending on the time at which the boundary of tradition is drawn in the territory of present-day Germany. Let's move on to the 5th point, genetics. That's pretty clear. XX is the woman and XY is the man. Well, and what about the body in the Finnish grave that was buried around the year 1100? The person had XXY. Not so unusual, it happens to 1 in 2000 men. There's also XYY, which occurs in only 1 in 590 men in Northern Europe, and XXX occurs in 1 in around 900 women. So we actually have 5 genders in genetics. Let's move on to the 6th point, the gender role. That's clear now. We have the housewife and the paid working man. Funny, my mum was a single parent and worked full time, and Angela Merkel wasn't a typical housewife either. Well, I don't need to get into this point about equality again. I've already done that in this video. Watch it again. So we usually have between 2 and 5 genders. We could go on about sexual preferences, but that has nothing to do with gender. Finally, a personal opinion. I have personally met trans people who were on their way to changing the gender. I know at least 3 men who are homosexual and 4 women who are lesbians. I don't know if I know people who are bisexual. All these people were nice, and I was able to have a good conversation with them. And also, I have met them and spoken to them many times, shaken hands with them or even hugged them. I have no doubt that I feel comfortable in my male body and with my heterosexuality. So it is not as if it's contagious. And my children also think that at least one homosexual man is totally cool. And so far, all my children of the gender that was obvious at birth are developing normally. And if things change, or they don't develop heterosexually, then I hope they will be happy. If you are sure of your own sexuality, you don't need to be afraid of a third or fourth gender. And those who are afraid of it are probably not sure of themselves and should really look into it. I hope you find yourself and allow others to find themselves in the same way. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next video.